So let's have a look at Austria. So first off, read this disclaimer carefully. Then do your good deed of the day by liking and commenting. So Austria, it's a country that we can find in Middle Europe. The stock market is 24% away from the 52-week low and 15% away from the highs. The ticker for the ETF is EWO, so we are looking at the one from iShares. This is the long-term chart, weekly data points. We do see time cycles. They have been very reliable. Differed a bit in duration, of course. We are still, based on the time cycle, part of a declining phase. But throughout the declining phase, you will have rallies. So if we have a pessimistic thesis about Austria, we could be forming a shoulder ahead, and maybe we form the right shoulder. But that could mean that a rally is on the horizon, just part of forming the right shoulder. Looking at the daily data points, we do see that we recently bounced from the rather important red 200-day moving average, being tradable before, but there's been some times where we do dip below and struggle below. So it's one of those levels you want to stay above if you are a bull. When we look at these other indicators, RSI on the weeklies, the PPO sort of in limbo. There's no like clear signal. Do have a sell signal though on MACD, which is not ideal for the bulls. On the daily data points, as the data is loading, MACD is in a downtrend. RSI, however, it is emerging from a relatively oversold level. The purple PPO, the 20-day PPO, is also emerging from an interesting level. So let's go into my notes right here. Okay, so head and S, but bull. So basically means that we could form head and shoulders, but it is bullish in that we were forming the right shoulder. So maybe I should add that. So bull because right shoulder. Of course, this is a very temporary bullish move. It is, of course, possible that while forming the right shoulder, if we do form the right shoulder, the rally becomes self-reinforcing and it neutralizes the head and shoulders pattern. That is, of course, the best case scenario for the bulls. But anyway, I do think that there's a bullish thesis, even if you are a bear, forming the right shoulder opens up a good shorting opportunity as the right shoulder is peaking. So yeah, I think I will give this one to the bulls. I give them a 6, but this is a weird bullish thesis. You also have the support at the 200 daily moving average, but the 200 day, it was declining, which sort of weakens the thesis. If you were to use that as like an entry signal, it's a weaker entry signal than hypothetical shoulder. Okay, next we look at the seasonality. To the left here, the last 5 years in green, 7 years in blue, 10 years in red. We usually see a bit more weakness heading into early April, but then you see that the first part of April is, well, the first half of April is very bullish. To the right, I see we are still in March. The current March, 11.5% loss. It's the second worst March in this data set, in this table. That's contrarian bullish. April, if you look at the sum, it is the number 1 month for Austria. So it's a very bullish month, which when we go here into the seasonality score, it's rather interesting. So let's give this one. Yeah, I think I will, given the context, I will give the bulls a 6. Let's look at the fundamentals. We are comparing Austria with the S&P 500. Looking at year-to-date performance, the S&P is beating Austria, 3.88% gain versus 0.6% loss. Beta 1.18 for Austria and 1 for America. So The Austrian stock market has more volatility. However, looking at price earnings, 7.8 versus 17.36. That's a massive difference in price earnings. The yield is 4.2% for Austria, 1.6 for America. So based on the metrics that the fundamental analysts like to look at, this is definitively in favor of them, in favor of Austria. 505 holdings versus 23. Finance is very big, then followed by utilities, which is sort of like a safe play. Energy minerals, yeah, non-energy minerals. So you could argue that energy minerals in the current context is interesting because there is definitively a demand. So when we go into the notes here on the fundamentals, in this case, I do think I actually will give the bulls, give them a 7 on the fundamentals. This is pretty bullish. Let's look at relative performance. Long term, there is a 90% positive correlation with S&P 500, 73% with Germany, and 93% with United Kingdom. Short term, 64% with S&P 500, 97% with Germany, and 96% with United Kingdom. So looking short and long term, the strongest correlation we do get is with EWU, which is the United Kingdom stock market ETF. So the reason why I think that you could sort of hypothesize that Austria might form a head and shoulders pattern is because United Kingdom, which it is very strongly correlated with, is forming a head and shoulders pattern. We haven't seen this pattern yet, though, in Austria. Could be a sign of weakness, though. But it could also be that there's might be some rotations now out of United Kingdom, and maybe some of that money will find a home in Austria. Looking at the seasonality here, you also see that bullishness in early April, March. It's been weak in UK, but it's not been as weak as what we saw in the case of Austria for March. April, however, is very bullish for UK, which is good given the correlation. So now let's compare them head to head. EWO slash EWU, like that. You could make the case that this looks a bit... there's some kind of horizontal support level here, a bit roughly drawn. Looking at RSI, we are at sort of interesting level, but not like a screaming buy. Much lower we would have that signal, but now it's sort of like it's low, but not like super low. Now looking at dailies, the horizontal support level is pretty clear in this case. If we draw a line, support back here, here, and a cluster of support back here as well. So there is definitively something here when it comes to horizontal support. On RSI, we are at support. Many times this has led to reversals, which would mean that Austria begins to outperform United Kingdom. Looking here at the seasonality for these two, okay, it gets very interesting. Looking here to the left, you do see that in April, Austria outperforms UK. March, this has been the second worst March for Austria in this pair. April, a bit mixed, but generally speaking, looking at the sum, there's a tendency for Austria to outperform UK. So, in this case, I will give the bulls, I give them a 7. So we end up with 6.5 here in favor of the bulls on this Austria ETF analysis. The entry signal is head and shoulders pattern. We are potentially forming a right shoulder. That is a temporary bullish pattern. It's not a long-term bullish pattern. So longer term, you could make a rather bearish case for Austria, also taking into account the time cycle. But right now it's interesting. If we were to lose support at this very key level, that would obviously be bearish. Then the bullish thesis goes out the window. It is very contingent on the entry signal because the entry signal also informs the stop loss. Okay, so we do have some time left. Let's look at some of the hot securities. Yeah, so here are some. Yeah, some of these lists are not that useful because these are they move a bit too big. Yeah, so let's instead look at some interesting securities, some well-known companies. Let's look at Apple, relatively known. Yeah, so it did recently form okay, this inverse head and shoulders pattern. It is playing itself out. So yeah, the bulls have something going on here. The issue for a stock like Apple is that the market cap is very, very substantial as such. That's a bit of an issue because for Apple to like double in value, they need to do very dramatic stuff. So yeah, it's a nice stock, but it's sort of like the super growth is behind it. Seasonality looks pretty good though, but let's look at some other stocks. So Nvidia, it's been in the news. They benefit very substantially from the whole AI, like generative AI specifically, revolution. It's really huge what's happening now with the GPT and other AIs like Midjourney, both of which I subscribe to. The thing is that this is a very big move in a short time frame. So when I see a chart like this, the bear comes out. Even though the long-term thesis is very bullish. Looking at RSI and PPO, we are not at extreme overbought yet, but still we are, however, very overbought on the weeklies. On the dailies, pretty high, but not like super dangerously high. The seasonality still is supportive. The current March is one of the best March. April looking pretty good. At least looking at the most recent years, but looking further back, there are issues. Here are the fundamentals. Yeah, there's not much value here. Price earnings is pretty high. So let's look here at the analyst price targets. So long term, I'm bullish on AI and Nvidia, but the question is, okay, who is left buying here? Okay, so the average price target is 3% above us. Some bulls are 32% above. So yes, the thesis is bullish, right? But GPT, it went live June last year. So this is not like completely new. And GPT had very explosive growth quickly. It certainly has accelerated this year, and that is very well reflected here in this chart. But the issue with these kinds of like thesis, right, where we have a news story, which is true, it might have been true way earlier though in the chart. So when you now see a bunch of news stories be like, oh, Nvidia is going to benefit so much from this, well, this already has benefited from this trend. Could it break out to a new all-time high? That's very much possible. Yeah, but if you look at the previous time, it broke out to a new all-time high right here. It did actually have a substantial break. Let's measure this break. So here is a bit of a breather, and we did go down, approaching 15%. So yeah, so even during an uptrend, that can happen. So yeah, all in all, we looked at Austria. Okay, so this is incorrect. Okay, we looked at we did not look at Australia, but Austria. Okay, it was the Austria ETF. So yeah, the name here was incorrect, but what we have looked at was correct. So yes, no worries, we did look at Austria. Australia is also an interesting stock market to have a bit of a look at, but that's another video entirely.